Today's speaker is John Brooks, Managing Director at Healthcare Capital. This company advises early-stage life sciences and companies and specializes in enabling innovative solutions in obesity, prediabetes, and diabetes. Mr. Brooks is the former president and CEO of the Joslin Diabetes Center. He's a well-known life sciences executive and has co-founded 7 life sciences companies, including Insulet, a disruptive insulin delivery company. He holds an MS in Business Administration and a BBA from the University of Massachusetts and is a certified public accountant. Please welcome John Brooks.
All right, why don't I get started? Well, again, it's a great honor, great privilege to be here and help you kind of wrap up this season's innovation series. So I thought what I would do is kind of give you a quick snapshot of diabetes, on a global scale, kind of the magnitude of the problem, and then kind of drill into, before we think about disrupting diabetes, what are some of the major changes going on in healthcare that really influence that? And then I'll go into a couple of fairly dense slides on what's possible. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but try to really provide an overview that there is a pretty radical transformation going on right now in diabetes. So I don't know if some of you, may not have an appreciation of really the magnitude of what we call the diabetes pandemic. So I think you can see here, this is the most recent information coming from the IDF last year, 415 million people around the world with diabetes. But you can see in not too many years down the road, it's projected to go to 642 million people. And you get a little bit of sense of really what parts of the world are just exploding, if you will, especially in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, many parts of the world. And I might just mention this is predominantly type 2 diabetes. So if you don't know, there's really 2 types of diabetes. Type 1, which is what my son had when he was 3, which has really kind of brought me into doing what I do, is an autoimmune disease. So that's where your T cells that are supposed to protect you turn and in fact attack your pancreas and kill those beta cells that respond to glucose and produce insulin. So that's a small piece of this. This is really predominantly type 2 diabetes. So that certainly has a genetic component. So your family history, your genes play a role, but a lot of it, as you know, is really driven by lifestyle, food, diet, exercise or lack of exercise. But I'll talk about, we even know some other things that are contributing factors, the environment, air pollution, water pollution, what goes on in the microbiome. But again, think of this as mostly type 2. Here's another little breakdown just to give you a little flavor. As you can see, hopefully you can see this little chart here, but obviously, as you look at some countries, U.S. certainly, we're looking at a pretty high rate of diabetes. We're seeing it all through different parts of Southeast Asia. In the Middle East, it probably represents about 1 in 3 of the citizens all through the Middle East have diabetes, and frankly, poorly controlled diabetes. India, probably about 1 in 10. China's now running about 13-14% of their population. So it's truly exploding. And again, genetics, but more importantly, as people eat more refined foods, more processed foods, it's really driving this undertaking. And yet, diabetes still probably doesn't get a lot of attention or understanding or appreciation. So if you look at it, maybe in a very simplistic way, here we are, roughly 1 in 11 adults in the world with diabetes. And, we fast forward not too many years, 1 in 10. So all of a sudden you're going to see literally, we could have, 1 in 10 that's going to be close to, if we get 7 billion people on the planet, 700 million people with diabetes. So again, a big problem. The other thing that I think probably isn't fully appreciated, and it's not a great statistic, but the fact that we're now seeing 5 million people die from diabetes. So in some ways, as you can see, it's eclipsing some of the other major non-communicable diseases, if you will. So it's really one of those situations where, again, a lot of focus over the years in dealing with some of these obviously critical conditions, but diabetes is really starting to outweigh them. And in fact, in Africa, where you have a lot of these conditions, the next big wave that's coming at them is in fact diabetes, as they really start exploiting, and selling their natural resources. Lots of, fast food companies, lots of processed foods. So we're kind of unfortunately exporting this problem. And then, I think the other takeaway is the fact that, again, here's some more statistics, but, we really haven't historically been really solving this problem. You can see 30 million people in the US with diabetes, close to 90 million people pre-diabetic in this country. So you kind of see the fuel that's really driving these changes. So I think, part of my discussion and topic this afternoon is really what can we do about it? Because the traditional sick care model approach is not working. So it's innovation. So as I said before, we think about diabetes. Let me just digress for a minute. And I think many of you know these are kind of the factors that are going to weigh into how we disrupt diabetes. So I think many of you know, and in Massachusetts, California, a few other states, when we're seeing the federal government move towards payments tied to outcomes. Payments for people with a chronic condition tied to how well they do over the course of the year, not tied to the number of times they go to the hospital, the clinic, the number of visits or procedures they have. So I think that's going to be a major game changer, especially, again, in a chronic condition like diabetes. You're seeing a lot of new companies. So if you think of it, Google, Apple, Samsung, a lot of consumer electronic companies getting into diabetes. Panasonic just bought a company, Bayer, which is a blood glucose meter. So all of a sudden you've got disrupting, if you will, new entrants that are bringing technology, analytics, all of their capabilities where they think they can bring a different solution, if you will. You look at a lot of the effort, if you want to think of it, CVS. So CVS, obviously the Minute Clinic, and not surprisingly, they're starting to look at, what else can they do other than flu shots and camp physicals. So not surprisingly, they're looking at chronic disease. We're seeing a lot more interest in basically, whether you want to call it telemedicine or e-visits or virtual visits, but again, starting to get away from the idea that healthcare, and usually it's sick care, it needs to be delivered in a bricks and mortar setting. How do we really think about, being able to deliver solutions, through an internet connection? Behavioral health, and that's really pretty important when it comes to diabetes, but really understanding, we can give people the right medicines, the right tools, the right technologies, but do we really understand kind of who they are, what makes them tick? Are they having other issues? So it's an area where, it's not just thinking we're going to solve it with drugs or technology. We really do need to understand the individual. Virtual care centers, again, you're looking at companies like, I'd call American Well, where literally, if you're having some condition, you call up and there's an expert on the other end of the phone, and literally they can listen to your symptoms and issues, and in many states they can actually issue a prescription, and you literally haven't left your house. So that's kind of a new phenomenon. Again, one of the key areas that I think is critical when it goes back to that area of prediabetes or obesity is well care. So in this country, unfortunately, in many other parts of the world, there were really not a lot of economics to really think about preventing diabetes from progressing. So, there's now increasing focus. In fact, the CMS, Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, has in fact put monies in the budget for seniors, Medicare recipients, to have payments tied to basically preventing them from developing, diabetes. So that's a fairly new phenomenon. We never saw that before. I think the other key is, whether you want to call it precision medicine, personalized medicine, but again, an appreciation of really tracking how people do 24/7, 365. And again, we can now do that with mobile phones, with smart devices. So it's an opportunity to really not just think about helping people episodically, but can we in fact monitor how they're doing and intervene if we see things trending in the wrong direction. Stem cells, big area here. I'll talk about how it relates to diabetes in terms of the artificial, well, there's an artificial pancreas, but then really beta cell regeneration. The microbiome, I'll just indicate that we now know that the gut bacteria that live within us and the differences in that gut bacteria has a huge role in terms of how enzymes are produced, hormones, how the body basically metabolizes. So we're just starting to scratch the surface, and obviously genomics. We understand all the differences in people that are going on. And then we're also seeing, which I think is an important phenomenon, that self-insured employers, amongst others, making investments in the health and wellness of their employees, no longer kind of kicking the can down the road or thinking, let's just put them in a different plan and we'll worry about it later. So a couple other things, wearables, I think you're seeing, whether people wearing Fitbits, I have my Misfit on, but we're really starting to pay more attention to movement, exercise, and the important thing is, how is that not just motivating you to do it, but how do we turn that into actually helping come up with better care plans or insights for you? Again, a big focus now on the power of big data. So how do we take information that used to just be stored in the electronic health records in hospitals? Now, surprisingly, maybe not, but looking at how to gain insights, how to really look at patterns, how to look at trends, how to really look at, are you on the right medication? Does that match up with where we know best practices are? Is your doctor kind of operating at an equivalency with his or her peers? So all of a sudden we have a huge opportunity to really get insights out of data. Biomarkers, I think we're appreciating that certain drugs don't work in certain people. So in this room, there's lots of diversity. You have a different genetic composition, metabolic composition. So we're starting to realize that we can't have one-size-fits-all solutions anymore. So it's really understanding which drugs or which therapies are best suited for you and give you the ones that are going to be effective. And it doesn't make sense to kind of trial and error, give you a lot of prescriptions that frankly don't work and probably drive side effects. And the other part of it is really looking at, again, point-of-care diagnostics, having that information, immediately available, not waiting, days or weeks for test results. Bundles, capitation, you're seeing this actually starting to happen right now in orthopedics. So if someone gets a total knee replacement, it's tied to a bundle, which means there's a fixed economic, which the doctor, the hospital, the company that's providing the implant, everybody's sharing at a fixed economic, and the idea is they're incentivized to make sure that patient has a good operation, recovers quickly, rehabs quickly, no complications, everybody benefits. If that patient, for whatever reason, doesn't do well, then in fact, everyone's going to basically feel the pain, if you will, from an economic standpoint. So kind of an interesting area. What I call the Internet of Healthcare things, more and more devices, if you will, products are being given some sort of connectivity, Bluetooth capability. And obviously part of the key is what do you do with that, but that's driving a lot. And then some other things I'll just cover quickly, really we see it in cancer, but it's developing elsewhere. Targeted therapies, really being able to deliver drugs or delivering therapies, looking at biosimilars, CRISPR, the ability to go in and edit any part of your genome and perhaps substitute a defective gene with one that's working. Fascinating stuff in gene editing. And then Uber Care, there's actually, Uber now will deliver nurses and pretty soon in some states, doctors to your house for a house call. So house calls are coming back, I guess. So let me kind of switch with that as a background. Some of this is a little bit repetitive, but now how does this translate into diabetes? And again, it really is this building phenomenon where, again, for a chronic condition, the mindset has been, we'll see people, a clinical service would see people 4 times a year. And again, great people, great doctors, nurses, educators. But the mindset was for the 361 days a year that you were not in the clinic, that obviously you were going to do a great job managing a very complicated condition. So I think we realized that just doesn't make sense. So the idea is, let's really look at how well people do over the span of a year. Let's really make sure, in fact, we're incentivizing the system to actually keep people out of the hospital, keep you out of the emergency room. So again, I think that's going to be a big change here. The other thing you see is this idea of smart glucometers, and there's going to be other smart devices, pumps and sensors. But now you have a situation the minute for people with diabetes, you do a finger stick generally, even though I know some folks are working on non-invasive, but you do a finger stick. And before, you'd get a result in 5 seconds on your glucometer, and that would tell you, what your blood sugars were, and, if you're a type 1, it would help you with your insulin. But now we're getting to the point where the minute you take that blood sugar test, that result is in the cloud. It's being analyzed. It's being looked at in the context of other information about you. And it's an opportunity to really trigger a call if, in fact, you want to call. And you can design or define when you want to get a call, at night or at work. Do you want to get a text message instead? But all of a sudden, you're getting real-time interaction, if you will, that helps you if, in fact, it looks like you're struggling with your care plan or your care management. So that's a company out in Chicago called Livongo is really driving that pretty extensively, and others. Again, retail health, so I mentioned that. Pretty soon you're going to see in the Minute Clinic that you can go to a Minute Clinic and basically have answers answered about your diabetes. You can go in and basically get some of your, if you're in relatively good shape, you can go to the Minute Clinic. You don't have to go to a more traditional, if you will, diabetes clinic. Again, we were experimenting at Joslin with virtual visits. You have a lot of college students that go off to school. They have type 1 diabetes, and literally they just kind of fall off the map. They're on their own. They're on campus. They're lucky if they see their endocrinologist maybe once in the summer when they're on school break. So we really put in a program where literally we could connect them to their endocrinologist, basically through a secure video link. And the idea is to really help people manage their disease. So you're not just thinking, once a year, because college students and as a whole, their level of diabetes control, is not very good. They go from being, the parents help them, the pediatric endocrinologists, and all of a sudden they're off on campus on their own. So big opportunities there. Again, there's now an appreciation, and I'm working with a number of companies where the idea is, how do we really help people at home manage their diabetes? So it's really an opportunity whether you can leverage the set-top box, whether you have an opportunity to have a lot of different devices in your home connected to that device. So it could be a scale, could be a glucometer, could be other things that are basically being analyzed. And then you're going to have someone basically call and help you understand your condition, especially for a lot of seniors or people that are at home because they're dealing with a lot of comorbidities. Again, I've talked about big data. I won't repeat that. Obviously opportunities with non-invasive devices. So right now, most blood sugar devices, they're checking the level of blood sugars, which is a level of how well you're controlling your diabetes. People are looking at the opportunity to basically have literally, instead of something that has to prick the skin or the interdermal interstitial fluid, it's an opportunity to basically almost put a bandage on. A little company like Google working on that. Obviously, you've heard about the contact lens. I put a question mark there because I think a lot of retinal specialists in diabetes are not sure that's going to work, but it could. You're now having companies that literally, there's a company, Senseonics, that's going to take a continuous glucose monitoring device, stick it under your skin. It's supposed to last right now for 6 months. You'll take it out, put a new one in. So all of a sudden, if you're a patient, you don't have to worry about having an extra device. It's literally going to be, working. It's going to be communicating. And, the idea is that they've found a way, presumably, to keep the body from following it, because many of you know the body has a tendency, if you put a foreign body in it, it tends to try to figure a way to defeat it, but people working on that. And one key area, cloud-based decision support. So this is an area where, be sensitive to time here, really understanding how do you take all this information and help both doctors and patients make intelligent decisions, and again, look at patterns, look at trending, look at things that you want to be able to identify earlier. I'm going to move through some of these because I was told to leave plenty of time for Q&A. Some other things that we're seeing, obviously there's been exercise and weight management programs around for a long time. But now, how do they work? Can you basically have weight management programs that really encourage you, reward you, and you don't physically have to go anywhere. You can basically get smart devices, smart apps, and really with social connectivity. So you're connected kind of virtually to other people as if you were going to a group meeting, but you're getting the benefits of really that encouragement, that motivation, you know, and that type of thing. Lots of opportunities, as I said, understanding the gut, but even bariatric surgery. I mean, there were so many insights when we first thought if you help people, you know, reduce their weight, their obesity by bariatric surgery, where you're literally, you know, taking out part of the intestine, we realized some of those people literally the day after the procedure, they didn't have diabetes. And it opened up this insight into the fact that there's a whole area in our bodies in the duodenal area that essentially controls the whole gut-brain connection. So there's an interesting company not too far from here, Fractal, that thinks there's an opportunity to basically ablate, to actually burn off part of that area to interrupt that gut-brain connection so the brain doesn't keep telling you I'm hungry when in fact you're not hungry. So some interesting stuff there. Opportunities to basically better drive insulin initiation and dosing in the hospital. The artificial pancreas, maybe I'll just kind of talk about that in next generation insulin. So I just came back from the American Diabetes Association meeting in New Orleans, and you know, there was a lot of excitement, you know, around the artificial pancreas. So this is where you're going to take a continuous glucose monitoring device, have it constantly communicate with an insulin delivery pump, and take inputs from, you know, could be a Fitbit, could be an accelerometer, could be food and all, but the idea is to all of a sudden have this closed loop system, basically keep your diabetes, your glucose and insulin levels in control, which is critical. So that's working its way through the FDA. Lots of companies, the FDA is eventually getting there, and lots of pressure from parents and others, but that's the idea really, again, a closed loop. One system informs the other. The other thing that's kind of interesting is next generation insulins, where right now, in fact, one of the problems with, you know, insulins is they're not fast enough to work in some of these artificial pancreas settings. So the whole key is how fast does it turn on, how predictable is it, and then you want to short what's called tail. So next generation insulin, there's actually insulins that are being worked on. Could be an oral insulin that you swallow. Could be an insulin that's glucose responsive. So it's basically going to provide more insulin if in fact it senses your glucose levels are higher, and less so it tries to avoid what's called hypoglycemia. There's even insulins where essentially, you know, it sounds kind of funny, but you could boil them. One of the problems with insulins today in many parts of the world I showed you is if they're not refrigerated, they basically crystallize, they create fibrils. So huge problem in keeping insulin viable. So, and then, you know, next generation obesity drugs, you know, that's an area where essentially, you know, we're starting to realize, you know, we've moved far away from the fen-pen area where people are taking obesity drugs and causing all sorts of cardiovascular problems. But again, I think we're starting to see some things there. So again, a lot to cover. I didn't go into a lot of detail, but I think hopefully you get a sense that there really are a tremendous number of opportunities, companies. You know, I think anytime companies, you know, kind of understand this transformation that's going on in healthcare and then diabetes, you know, I think there's money to be made. And obviously the objective is not just the money, but to really help, you know, people with diabetes, as you saw, both here in the US and globally. You know, we need to come up with a way that we're going to start, you know, putting a halt to those numbers and reverse them in the other direction. So with that, happy to entertain any questions. Yeah, it's a good question. So usually what happens, you know, if you go for a physical, you know, there's two tests. One is, you know, just a fasting blood glucose level. And if that's elevated, usually there's a threshold around 100 or so. You know, if it ranges between 100 and 120, you know, that's usually a sign. There's also something called a A1C test. So that's where the glucose gets basically linked to your red blood cells. And every 90 days, your red blood cells turn over. So it's called A1C, but it's a way. So either of those tests, you know, usually are highly predictive, and family history is a big factor. The problem today is that there hasn't been a lot of focus on prediabetes. Sometimes the prescription has been lose weight and exercise, and that frankly hasn't been translating very well. So there are some companies that I think are even trying to come up with, maybe a way to non-invasively, check blood glucoses with the idea that they could be a screening device for people that are pre-diabetic. Yeah, it's a great question. So, it doesn't get anywhere near that amount of funding. I think there's still a little bit of a, perhaps a little bit of a sense in especially type 2 diabetes where there's still a little bit of what I would call a, kind of this mindset, look, people just brought it on their own, so why are we going to spend a lot of money? Obviously, probably much more money spent in type 1, to try to understand, is there an opportunity to really change that regulatory T cell process? I mean, in some ways, kind of rebooting the thymus. But, there's more money now because I think the federal government, it hadn't been there, but it's starting to build because I think an appreciation that, this is starting to become a very costly disease. And one thing about diabetes is it drives kidney disease, chronic kidney disease, it drives cardiovascular issues, peripheral vascular issues, leads to amputation. People end up with vision problems. So it really drives all the downstream complications that are pretty expensive. But it's still, as an order of magnitude, some diseases, cancer, back in the day, AIDS and all. I mean, those diseases kind of have a more acute, I guess, concern, where diabetes is kind of this very gradual progressive disease. And again, that's always a struggle to get the right amount of money to support research. It's a great question. So I'm chairman of the board of a company that's working on some of these novel insulins, and we were just mapping out the plans the other day. So literally, once you have a clinical candidate, you go through a number of different steps, all regulatory driven, but the earliest, so let's say we expect to have our clinical candidate for one of those insulins available at the end of this year. Right now, we would project that product won't be available until 2023, just because it has to go through, all these, it's really regulatory hurdles. So, that's why I said in the artificial pancreas, I mean, there were just many people from the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, JDRF, and others, I mean, really went down and kind of hammered the FDA, if you will, to try to really shorten some of these timelines. You see some of the recent things with Duchenne's disease, where again, I think parent organizations and, people are trying to convince the FDA that, perfection is the enemy of good, not that you want to put anyone at risk, but, I think the idea is that even the artificial pancreas, if you think of it with algorithms that are going to try to determine blood glucose, exercise, all these parameters, and then how do you use that to regulate insulin delivery, those algorithms are never going to be as good as they need to be until lots of people are using it. So, a little bit of the problem with the FDA, they're trying to have the companies like create a perfect solution, and that's just not reality. You gotta, and again, you don't want to harm anyone, but at the end of the day, the only way you're going to find out is to let people use it and, be careful with using it. But so I'd say a big issue is regulatory, and then to some extent, reimbursement was a problem. I mean, there used to be a situation, it's now better, when a CGM device, so a continuous glucose monitoring device, we had a problem at Jocelyn where patients that were in relatively good control, so they were doing pretty good but wanted to go in a CGM, the insurance company said, well, you're in good control, you don't need to go in a CGM. So then you'd have patients for literally 30 days doing poorly, managing their diabetes, so their diabetes will look bad, and then they go back to the insurance company and say, well, I'm poorly controlled, oh, you can have it. Kind of this kind of crazy approach here. So, but I think you're going to see with the payers, they're going to be much more willing, I think, to invest in the right or newer technologies because, their payment's going to be tied to outcomes. So all of a sudden it's like, boy, if I make this investment and help this person, keep them out of the hospital room, keep them out of the emergency room, all of a sudden they're going to realize that's very cost effective. Yeah, so again, historically, I mean, there weren't many because there was no economics unless you were going to get patient self-pay. So I'd say right now it's still early days, and it's really quite variable around the country. I kind of call it a 50-state checkered quilt, because every state's a little bit different. But Massachusetts, California, and again, these self-insured employers are in fact the ones that are willing to make those investments. So we see a lot of self-insured employers who are responsible, not just during their employment, but perhaps in retirement, are in fact willing to make investments in companies that are thinking about wellness, prevention, and they're moving beyond, just kind of saying, here's a pedometer, go walk at lunchtime, but I think they're becoming much more focused on really, fundamental investments, because someone showed them that at the end of the day, and again, you got to make sure the employees are motivated, but if they're motivated, they're involved, I think it's pretty easy to show that that's going to produce long-term benefits. Yes, I mean, there hasn't been a lot of money for screening. I mean, even the whole idea about identifying who's pre-diabetic and, other than getting a $150 reimbursement for getting a gym membership, there hasn't been a lot of money for prevention, wellness, maybe you'd get a once-a-year physical, but, if someone said, hey, I want to sign up for a weight management program, I think they're starting to come around on that, and again, I think, as you said, they're trying to make sure that, is it a measurable difference? Does it make a real, but I think they're starting to understand. And again, for a lot of payers, they may be just a third-party administrator for a large, self-insured employer. I think you're starting to see some of the states look at it, because again, the economics are pretty compelling. I mean, in this country right now, we spend about $245 trillion on diabetes, so the numbers are huge. Even the state of Texas spends $35 billion on diabetes, so huge costs that aren't going to go away.